All right, Mr. Pete, who did not get to teach today.
No, I had something ready, but next time.
Next time.
So when you were talking about the living and the dead being offered, then what I immediately thought back to was Deuteronomy 30:19, where he talks, I have set before you life and death, blessing and the curse. I think that relates back to what Peter was talking about also, doesn't it?
I think I quoted that actually, so yes, I would agree.
Okay, maybe that's where I thought of it.
Yeah, I did quote it at some point. I said where Moses did say, I lay before you life and death. I didn't say it was Deuteronomy 30, but you guys should know where that is. But yes, I did quote that.
And then in 1 Peter, when he was talking about don't be surprised at the trials that you get to try you, then I thought back to Deuteronomy 10:12.
Right. Okay, so 10:12 is, and now Israel, what does Yahweh want from you? And he lays out his expectations, right? He expects you to fear him, to walk in all his ways, okay, to love him, to serve him. And so that's all laid out in Deuteronomy 10:12. All right, Melissa.
Thank you, Rabbi. That was teaching that was right in line with what Yahweh has been teaching me. And I'm thankful that you teach us to not judge each other and to love each other. Because if we're not judging them, we're not going to be talking about them, gossiping, and we don't know what's going on in their lives. And so, so people say, oh, my heart. Well, your heart pumps blood. It's an organ. An organ doesn't think. It's what's in your mind. And so that lined up, and it's like you taught us that only Satan can only egg on what we already have there, the desires that we have. And so when I was thinking about that commercial came to my mind, Let Go of My Ego, that he used to, play all the time. And so if we are, this morning when I was getting ready, this song started playing about, it's Christian, but they were singing in Hebrew, about going to the enemy's camp. And as a Christian, we used to sing this song, I'm going to the enemy's camp to take back what the devil has stolen. Well, we know that that's not true. There's, that's false doctrine, because he can only egg on what's already there, right, in the flesh. So I appreciated that teaching him. But when I was thinking about it and I was talking to Yahweh, I realized that I live in the enemy's camp. My flesh is the camp, and whatever I'm thinking in my mind, whether it's Yahweh or flesh or worldly things, I'm my own worst enemy most of the time, because I'm not in line with his word, or I'm so busy thinking about what everybody else does or another job or whatever. Right. And then sometimes I binge watch programs, and I had to ask myself why. It's because they always have a happy ending. Because even though things may not be right, they always find that right person. It has a happy ending. And they're in this community, and they love each other, and they stick together. And I was thinking, I wish I had that. But you know what? Then I realized I have that. We are that community. We stick together. We love each other. If we don't shred each other to pieces, you can't love each other. And, it's like you always show me, you can't be... he had to open the curtain and show me myself.
Right.
And that's exactly what you did today. That was right, spot on with what he showed me. When he pulls back that curtain, we're here to see our faults and to overcome, because if you don't overcome, you're not going to get in. And we want to spend forever with him. So we are that community. We do love each other. And so I'm so grateful for you and so thankful that you taught that way today. And thank you so very much.
Amen. You know what? Let me say something that may, I guess, be profound or not. You can sit down. I'm just.
Yeah, I had one more.
Oh, you have one more question? Okay, let me just say this first then. All right. So, look, I don't think that you're picturing the kingdom correctly in some ways. You're going to spend not necessarily a whole lot more time with him than you do now. You're still going to be spending all your time mostly with each other. Now, he will be sovereign. He will be here. But I don't know what kind of level of spending time in his presence and interacting with him you think you're going to be doing. Okay, it's still one being, right, sitting on a throne. Yeshua will be here, etc. But you're going to be still doing most of your interacting with each other. Can we not picture that? I mean, most of your time is not going to just be sitting in the Creator's presence doing nothing. When you are going to be doing, you're going to be doing with each other, okay? He's still going to be in all, through all, and guiding all, etc., but you're going to be, so if you can't figure out any way to fall in love with each other now, it's going to be a little challenging in the forever, okay? Because you're going to spend most of your time with each other. I mean, that's what I'm picturing, and maybe you never really thought of it that way. Oh, because Melissa made a statement that is such a very standard Christian and other type of statement of, well, I know we're just going to spend, and we'll be spending all our time with him or whatever. I'm just looking forward to living and spending my time with him. Might not look like you think it does, okay? It just might not look like you think it does. Now, he's going to be much more present because he's going to be here. But unless you're going to be sitting with him in Jerusalem, you're going to be not spending most of your time in that way. Did that mess anybody up, or does that make any sense? Make sense? Okay? So if that's the reality, why are we not making more of an effort to get to love each other and become lovable? Okay? I don't know why we're not doing that, understanding that, I was actually really, I didn't say it the other day, but I happened to go bowling with my daughter, and I was really delighted to see 4 of the ladies were there with each other. I didn't know that they were friends, not friends, whatever. And I didn't know how well they knew each other just from watching them in the congregation. But there were these 4 ladies just hanging out from the congregation, bowling and having a great time. And it was good to see people making relationships and doing things together, and making that effort, all right? Now, I understand that some of you are responders, so you're waiting for somebody to initiate. Well, that means those of you who are initiators need to initiate. Unfortunately, there's a lot less initiators than responders in the world. That's one of the categories I invented as far as like personalities, responders and initiators. But become more of an initiator. Go out there and say hi to somebody. Say, hey, go get a cup of coffee, maybe go do something together. Learn how you can fall in love with each other, all right? Because you're going to be, I'm hopeful, I think you should be hopeful, spending forever with each other. That's kind of the point. It's not about spending forever with him only, okay? It's not just going to be like you and him time. It's going to be billions of you and him, okay? I don't think anybody's probably ever said it to you. I don't think I've ever said it that way before. I just want to make sure that we're focusing on these things right. It will be incredible and indescribable being with him. I'm not minimizing that at all. I don't know what that's actually going to look like and what that's going to feel like with him here. But he's not going to give us all incorruptible bodies to just sit and strum a harp and stare at him. He's going to have stuff for us to do, and we're going to be doing it together. Okay, he's going to team us up or whatever he's going to do. I mean, do you think that the structure of the world and societies is for no purpose, that we do things in groups? That we organize ourselves into groups? Just so that when we get into the kingdom, he's not going to use that? That doesn't make any sense, right? So we should be practicing this group dynamic a lot better, and quite frankly, a lot of people fail at it, and that's why we have a lot of people eventually leave, because they haven't figured out how to work the uncomfortableness of a group dynamic that's not ideal to whatever you think ideal looks like. And so then we end up, kind of having to go our own way. I don't think that's really how his plan, is designed. He wants us to figure things out so that we can work together, all right? All right. Look, when I created m.t.o.i as an organization, the mission statement was working together to serve the body. That was what the leadership's kind of mission statement was, working together. All right. And then to serve, which I think is what we're going to be doing in the forever also. We're going to be working together to serve him, do whatever he wants, whatever he has his plans. We trust that. We're not really concerned what it is. We just trust that whatever it is going to be amazing. Amen? Amen. Melissa, you say another thing?
So what does the scripture mean when it says be wise as a serpent and gentle as a dove? Can you I want to make sure I understand that.
Okay. So he's trying to use creatures that we think of that, for example, with the serpent. Okay, a serpent is going to be very crafty about how it's going to sneak up on and get its prey. It's not just going to slither up and just think that something's just going to sit there and wait for it. So it has to be use wisdom and thinking and discernment and look at the environment and find the right spot and where to just wait and how the prey acts and what their patterns or behaviors. There's a lot of thinking going on. So it takes wisdom. Without wisdom, that snake is going to starve, okay? It's not, actually, you know what, I was going to say it's not like the other predators, but even when you look at what the beasts, like the big cats do. I mean, they still have to use some wisdom or they're not going to catch the prey. They're going to look at the prey, they're going to find the weak one or the slower one or whatever. They have to be crafty. So he's saying is, when you're doing things, understand that these successful creatures in their environments use a lot of wisdom to survive, okay, under their conditions, right? To survive in their way. Then he says, as far as doves, we think of doves as being very gentle and unthreatening and just these very soft and gentle creatures. So he's telling you, look, I want you to use the wisdom or craftiness for survival, which means you have to be paying attention to the environment, to the people around you, so that you can navigate successfully. And by the way, that also means you don't become prey to something else, which that snake has to be careful with, because otherwise something else is going to get them. And so that's where the wisdom is. Okay, wisdom is understanding, if you understand you're a snake, then there's certain wisdom for being a snake. If you understand that you're a human being, there's certain wisdom that's for being a human being. And it has a lot to do with understanding, paying attention to the world around you so that you can be successful, so you can navigate through that world. And as far as the innocent as a dove or being as gentle as a dove, well, I think it's just the way we picture animals, okay? The dove is pictured as a very gentle, unthreatening thing.
Thank you, Rabbi. I appreciate it.
Okay, you're welcome. Good question.
This is one teaching I was thinking that I have to make it a point this week to listen to this again. This week, not later. There are a lot of things to take away. And one of the things I took away was when you talked about dead and being resurrected and all that. Words don't always mean what we think they mean. Dead doesn't always mean literally dead, and being resurrected doesn't always mean coming up from a literal grave. And we have to understand that. And my thought went to some of the emails we get. People think of Sabbath as always meaning a weekly Sabbath. It doesn't. People think of circumcision always as meaning a physical act rather than groups of people. So what I learned from this is we have to be very careful how we read the scriptures and how we put things in context. And the other thing was the therefore. What comes before the therefores in the scripture.
Sure.
That's what I took away from it.
Well, good. Look, I don't know how to put this without it coming across wrong. I've said it so many times. Very humbly, I'm trying to get this point across. I don't believe, okay, this is my opinion, I don't believe that this was ever intended to be understood without guidance, okay? When I say understood, I mean in its fullness. A lot of things are very straightforward, okay? So sure, those things you can understand. But even those things have layers and depth to them that you won't get without guidance. He intended this to be instructed. That's my opinion, okay? And so when you listen to these teachings and things are brought to you, and they're not things that anybody taught me. That's what you also have to understand. It's not like I'm sharing stuff that somebody taught me. Most of this is coming from him and to me, to you, as I'm reading it from the verses, and he's connecting those dots, what the Ruach does, right? The Ruach connects things for me. Okay, brings to remembrance this verse or that verse that gets stirred up when I'm reading about this. So when I'm reading 1 Peter 4, he brought me to Philippians 2:5. He brought me to Ephesians 4. He brought me to Ephesians 2. He brought me to Galatians 5. Okay, he brought me to 1 Corinthians 13. But those weren't things I had to go look up. He just brought them into my head. I mean, these are verses obviously I've already put in. So it wasn't hard to find them. I knew where it said all these things already. All right? But I didn't know how they were connected to what Peter was talking about until I was reading it, realizing that I'm reading it from the point of view of instructing. And my role is to then be able to bring clarity as to what, at least I believe in being inspired with, is what the writer was actually trying to say. using their own particular idiomatic phrases, etc. It's like Paul loved to talk about those of the circumcision and those of the uncircumcision, and in those places he was never talking about circumcision. You'd have to understand that that's not Paul. Paul is talking about, when he says the circumcision, he's talking about those born Jewish, and those of the uncircumcision, those born Gentile. But that was his way of using words to say that phrase. That was his idiom for referring to those groups of people. But if you don't have anybody ever explain that to you, you might miss something. When it's talking about preaching to those in the grave, or those in prison, or those that are dead, we can cover all of those verses and see that it's not talking about people that are actually physically dead, or actually physically in a prison. He talks about those in prison. He could be talking about the scattered tribes that have been banished and scattered, basically imprisoned to a certain degree. I mean, there's so many ways that things could be explained. Through inspiration, hopefully we're getting those right answers. But you would not, look, when Rabbi Tom comes up here, he's been doing this longer than me, okay? But he'll tell you that since being here, he's learned more than in any of the previous years, because it's not me, it's what Abba gives me to explain these things, which is why you don't hear anybody else teaching them. No, it's not because he doesn't want anybody else to teach them. I don't know what he's sharing with anybody, they're just not teaching it. But I haven't heard anybody teach most of the things that I've taught you. Okay, which either makes me completely wrong because I'm all on my own on an island by myself, or just maybe I have some inspiration that you should show a little respect for, you know? And it is what it is, either way, okay? And I want you to appreciate that Rabbi Tom, right, he's Rabbi Tom, said he needs to go re-listen to something because he knows there's things that were unpackaged in there. And I'm going to tell you with all humility, if you listen to anything I teach just once, you did not hear the message, okay? Because what's in those messages is written or spoken very similar to Scripture in that there's depth and layers. And I'm not thinking about them when I'm saying it, but when I go back and listen, I realize just how much depth and layers were in there that you can miss because one of the layers hit you and that distracted you and then you missed two other things, okay? So you must use the pause button and go back and unpackage things, all right? One of the great experiences I got to do, one time we did a Heart of the Matter challenge, okay? Where we were gonna listen to all 64 parts for the 64 days leading to trumpets, all right? Somebody had come up with the idea and I said, sure, we did it on Marco Polo. And so everybody was gonna listen to a part every day and then get on Marco Polo and talk a little bit about what they read, what they heard and what they got out of it. So I did for the first 8 or 10 of them, I did what I call a director's cut. I went and re-listened to it, and then I gave my bullet points of what you should have got out of that particular part of the teaching. And there were people that after I gave my bullet points said, man, I listened to that 3 times today and I still missed some of those. But because I just brought out the things that I know after listening to it that you should have got out of it. Did you catch this? Did you catch this? These are the things that you should have got out of it, my director's cut. And they're all things I actually said in that teaching, but yet, if your mind is focused on one piece, you might miss another piece, especially if you're in the room listening to it live. If I hit you with something, your brain goes, whoa, then that whoa just made you miss 3 things I said after the whoa, okay? Because it's coming out fast, right? So you have to go back and listen. You have to. I go back and listen. Why? Remember, my note simply says 1 Peter 4, Philippians 2:5, Ephesians 4. I mean, it just has lists of verses. So everything I said to you came out as I said it. I have to go back and listen because some of the stuff I'm like, I've never said it before. I got to remember what I said. So I'll go back and listen, you know. And there are times when I've gone back and listened to something that was much older, like say goes back 10 or 15 years, and I'll be like, I don't even remember knowing that. Or how did I know that at that time? And I said that, what? And it's like, really? You know, because it's not scripted, right? Well, it's bullet pointed, but it's not pre-written. So I'm telling you, I go back and listen to everything too. Because you guys are gonna ask me questions about it. I'm gonna be like, I don't, you know, especially those of you who listen to the same thing 4 or 5 times and you know it better than I do. At least you know what I said better than I do. Because sometimes people say to me, you know when you said this? I'm like, no, I don't really remember that. I'll remember if it's something I definitely didn't say, because I've been people say, well, I was listening to this thing and you said this. I said, oh, no, I did not. You find the timestamp on that and we'll go back and look at it. And when they do, it never is what they said it was. They just didn't understand what I was saying, right? Anyway, Sarah Beth.
Yeah, I had a few of those whoa moments, so I'm certain I missed a lot. Thank you. This was exactly what I needed for today. Before I get to my comment, what you were telling Melissa about, seeing, getting to spend time with Yahweh in the forever, right? It hit me because that messed me up. I was like, no, wait, what are you talking about? I don't like that new perspective. And I realized it was because it was looking through a lens of my love language.
Right.
That quality time. But because as we're interpreting scripture through our lenses, but if we look at it as it might be like at the workplace, the boss is always there. He's there and watching, but you're going to interact with your coworkers a whole lot more than the boss. Is that correct?
That's correct. But also, I should have said this. That's why I like when people ask questions, but give me a chance to rephrase. Whatever is going to be, first of all, you will get it wrong if you think whatever you think it is now. And second of all, it will be better than you would have thought. Okay? So even if what I said doesn't sound as good as what you were hoping for, it's still going to be better than what you thought. It will not be what you thought. At least nobody has it exactly right in their head what it's going to look like. He says that man has not, the thought, we have no idea, we can't even imagine how great all the stuff is that he has in mind for us, okay? Man has never conceived of just how great this is going to be. So know two things. One, you're not going to be right about what you think. And two, it's going to be better than what you could have ever thought. So no matter if I'm right or wrong about some aspect of this, it doesn't matter. Because if I'm right, it's still going to be better. If I'm wrong, it's still going to be better. Whatever it is, I can assure you, is going to be better than anything you can think of. So you should never allow your brain to go into disappointment mode, like, oh, I'm going to be disappointed if I can't have this. It's still going to be better than whatever you think. Because we are not able to imagine it. That's what Scripture says, and I agree with that, because it's going to be on such a different level. How could you even imagine what that's going to all feel like, be like, etc., right? So I want you to be assured that A, it's not going to be what you expect, not completely, and B, it will be better than anything you could have thought of, okay? So even if you're thinking, well, yeah, it's going to be like he's the supervisor and we're going to be working together. Yeah, I think we're going to be doing a lot with each other because he's building a forever community. That's what he's inspired me to look at it as, okay? And a community spends most of its time interacting with each other and doing stuff with each other. But now, instead of having him be invisible and not accessible in any kind of direct, tangible way, he's going to literally be here. How is that going to change everything? Well, first of all, it's going to change everything. How? I don't know. But it will change everything. But I just don't think it's going to be this whole community thing to just, for no reason, just to now, it's just going to be you and him. And all of us having some sort of just individual relationship with him, and the rest of this just goes out the window. See, that doesn't logically, right? I'm using the mindset thing. Logically doesn't make any sense to then spend all this time teaching us how to be community, only to not need it, okay, beyond this finite fleshly life, right? So that's just me putting that together. All right.
And then the other thing I got, it's sort of a comment, and hopefully it prompts you to say more stuff. You were talking about, our suffering and are we maturing? Are we handling it with maturity and so on and so forth? And you took us to 1 Corinthians 13 and talking about enduring with each other and being patient and compassionate. Well, I was listening to everything through the lens of I was my own suffering this week. And then, of course, I had to translate everything you said about, being impatient with other people or kind or whatever to myself. And that was one of my distracting ahas.
All right, so I'm going to disagree with something Melissa said as I explained to you. Melissa, actually, they've done some scientific work to understand that there is actually a thinking aspect of this organ that we call the heart. It's really where the emotions are more based. And so there is, but it's more of the emotions, right? We think, that's the logical, rational. We feel, and there's some of that somehow chemically happening down, they point to this other organ in the heart, okay? So there's some science that's saying there's a second mind that we have. All right, now, that being said though, for you were causing your suffering because your feelings were being triggered by some thoughts that you didn't then control the feelings of. Okay? Because you observed certain things that you didn't necessarily like, or they were whatever, and then you allowed a feeling of negativity towards yourself, towards others, or whatever it was, to come and feed into that. all right? So all of the senses feed into this. This other organ then decides how to feel about that, and then you have to decide if you agree with what this other organ decided about feeling with it, okay? So it's not that you decide up here how to feel about something. That feeling is generated in a different part of your system, but that doesn't mean it just gets to run, because this should be the governing part of your system, where it says, hold on, I know we just got pissed off, but we need to calm down, because that's not actually what we should be reacting to this right now. That reaction came from in here, but up here has to evaluate it and say, oh, no, we don't need to go there, okay? So for all you TE people, then come and talk to somebody like me and get counsel. Well, that's Myers-Briggs letters, so that you get your outside thinking to help you with that. All you TI people, then you have to get inside with your thinking and do your logic and go, is this accurate? Is this the right way for me to be? All right? So it can help you at least with that part. But if you're driving with feelings, then you're not going to be as quick or easy to get that logical part to jump in, okay? And if you're driving with sensing, again, you're going to be in that more visceral sort of place than able to logically extrapolate out, wait a minute, is that really where this is going? Is that really the right place for me to be? So you got to just understand that that's where, if you're using your letters, you could be in a challenging place, depending on especially when negative things happen around you, okay? Go ahead.
Thank you, that's helpful. But would you say I'm correct in saying that part of the logic is if you're going to love self, you need to do that? Everything you corrected us about not being enduring compassion.
Yeah, no, you have to do all that, sure. But also what I would say, like for you, like a lot of times for you, you will use more of a TE and call me and say, am I thinking about this right? Am I handling this right? Why am I upset? How do I handle this? That way you're getting an external, coming from outside thinking to help balance something that you are not able to do internally yourself, okay? And so that's where advisors and counselors are good, important pieces of what you have. Because maybe you can't get there with your thinking process because your thinking process is not matured enough, meaning matured, I'm saying in terms of being strong enough to step in where it needs to be. It has not grown into that place because you're still much more emotion driven, let's say, okay? All right. So for those of you that are with the letters, I'm an ENTP, which means that, my co-pilot there is an internal thinking, all right? So I spend a lot of time using that to balance my extrapolating out, intuitively and stuff like that. But just understand that I have a thinking in the front seat of the car there, okay, which helps in some ways, okay? It helps, all right? All right. David.
I come to through your teachings, aha moments. The light bulb comes on, and thank you. And I am attracted to facts and history of what led me to this understanding, and then you made it clear over the years. You talk about Christianity and Judaism, where it's all through Scripture. He says, "I will not change." Gives a forewarning for the prophecy to even after the fact, and Christianity changed things to make what the good news is really is or not. And you clarified exactly what it is.
And part of the good news is that he doesn't change.
Right. And then
that is part of the good news message, that he says, right, I need you to know, positive and forward looking, you can count on me, I don't change.
Exactly. And then you have the Jews who have also all prophesied it in their teaching. They're learning this as children and then don't see it when it happens. And so when I was, years ago, I was given the ISR and I took one day, I was like, I'm going to read everything about, stopping everywhere where it talks about the Sabbath. And I come to 14:10, where the ones that will survive or live through that time will be the set apart ones, observing his laws and doing what he said, his instructions, as you have mentioned before. And in the teaching of the good news, this week I came across, I went to the end. And there he talks about, Yeshua's warning and talking to John, where if anybody takes away from the word, Revelations 22:19.
Right.
And if anyone takes away from the words of the book of this prophecy, Elohim shall take away his part from the book of life out of the rest set apart city which are written in this book. But previously on 18, for I witness to anyone hearing the words of prophecy of this book, if anyone adds to them, Elohim shall add to him the plagues which are written in this book. And there you have both Christianity and Judaism doing both,
Yep.
or one or the other.
But this also matches back all the way into the Old Testament where he says multiple times, do not add or take away from what I've said, right? And so you see he still feels that way in the last chapter of the last book, okay?
So the warnings that he gives us all through Scripture, Jeremiah, Psalms, everywhere, I do not change, and then there. So thank you, Rabbi, for teaching us the good news the way it should be taught.
Now I want you to bear in mind, and I don't think I've ever said this, okay? But both Christianity and Judaism have a lot of their problems because, ready for this? They're trauma responses. Think about that for a minute. Remember, when Yeshua shows up, had the Jewish community been through a lot of trauma? Like, go all the way back to hundreds of years, but even just more recently, right before Yeshua, not too long before that, you have the whole thing with the Greeks and the Maccabees and the whole situation there. There's trauma. They're under occupation with Rome. Okay, so a lot of it is defensively setting up a trauma response. Okay, and then in Christianity's birth, where they were horrible and violent and everything else that they did when they started out, creating also trauma responses. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff going on. And a lot of the trauma response then tends to point fingers, which is why the Christians pointed fingers at the Jews. Okay, and the Jews will then point fingers at the Christians, and everybody wants to point fingers at everything. But these are trauma responses. I haven't really thought it through until I just said it, so I'd like to dig more. I'll have to, in my own little ruminating, dig more into the idea that a lot of what we have are trauma responses. As a people, though, not just individually, okay? So when Jews struggle to receive the New Testament stuff, part of it's because of a trauma response. And so it's understandable. And people are like, well, I tried to explain that, Yeshua is not Jesus, it's not the same thing, and it's different. They think you're just playing semantics with them to try to sell them the same thing they have a trauma response to. Because remember, they've got about 2,000 years of trauma response to this New Testament Messiah, the way the church kind of used that against them, okay? And so that's, again, something I want you to think about, that these, and actually a lot of the people that left, they're also leaving in terms of trauma responses. A lot of you are let me rephrase that. All of you are trauma victims, all of you. How you respond to that is gonna be one of the determining factors of how successful you are in your growth, in your relationships and everything else, but we're all trauma victims. I don't think we have anybody here that would say, well, I've never had any trauma, all right? Everybody's got some of those things that they've had in their lives. And so I think that sometimes you can see it even affect a people, okay? That's certainly, look, they certainly see that in Judas, in the way he reacted with Yeshua, because Yeshua was not going to do what he, through his trauma thought process and his emotions from a trauma, expected him to do, All right, thank you, David. All right, live stream.
All right, the first one's from Rumble, from Chris Wybe. I was thinking about 1 Peter 4:8 and Ecclesiastes 10:4 with respect to how we treat leadership. Do we leave our post immediately, or do we seek healing?
Okay, I guess in order to answer that, I'm going to have to look up the verses that he used. Ecclesiastes what, and what were the verses?
1 Peter 4:8
Okay,
and Ecclesiastes 10:4.
Okay, 1 Peter 4:8. And above all, have fervent love one for another. Okay, covers a great amount of sins. And Ecclesiastes, which one?
10:4.
10:4, thank you. All right. If the spirit of the ruler rises against you, you do not leave your post, for calmness lays to rest great faults. Okay, I like the way that works out, okay? If the intrinsic nature of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your post. Interesting. All right, you know what, Chris? I don't have enough context as to what Solomon is talking about here in Ecclesiastes, specifically in the context of that. But the thing is this, because I don't think that they match necessarily. What's being mentioned in Kohelet, in Ecclesiastes, could be something similar to like, David not leaving his post, or actually he ran away because Saul was trying to kill him, but he wasn't going to attack Saul, okay, even though he was being attacked by the king. He says, you stake your post, even if the king is doing whatever, you stay to your post and do what you need to do. Look, a lot of you, that could also be, if you're in the right place, doing the right things, and your leader tends to lose his mind, like happened with Saul or whatever, and starts going off in a direction, you do have a choice to stay or to leave. And under certain conditions, I certainly have no problem with people leaving, okay? I really don't, because I've gone to places and left because I realized the teaching, it's always been about the teaching, and I've left over people. The teaching just wasn't there that it needed to be, okay? And so, to me, the one legitimate reason to leave more than anything else is teaching, all right? If the teaching is not in the way you understand it right, or this or that or whatever, or you're not growing or not being fed or not. I left places not because their teaching was wrong, but I just wasn't learning anything. They just were just teaching the normal standard fluff, and it was just nothing of value, right? And so, anyway, next.
All right, from Easy D. Herrera, this one's a two-parter. Sharing in Messiah's sufferings, we learn to rejoice in them because Yeshua did it, and we are not alone. Because he prevailed, so can we. Our job in suffering is that we commit to our lives to our trustworthy Creator in doing good, correct?
That is an aspect of it, all right? Look, the point of, go listen to the baptism of fire. It really goes into explaining the whole point of trials, okay? And I think that would help you. All right, next.
All right, from Janet Hoffman, this one's also a two-parter. So when we are having a strong emotional reaction like anger or insecurity, we are focusing on a fleshly desire, and what we need to do is to get our brains to turn towards the mind of Messiah, fruit of the Spirit, to fix our mindset.
Look, the last part of that, just be careful with it when it says that what we need to do is get our brains to turn towards the mind of Messiah to fix our mindset. Just to understand that the fruit of the Spirit is you have to do it exactly like you said. You have to get your brain to turn towards. Let this mind be in you. Don't think that somehow the fruit in some way or something about the Spirit is just going to come in and fix everything, right? What you're doing is exactly the words you have there. When I read it again, I realized that I don't have an issue at all with what you said. What we need to do is get our brains to turn. Like Philippians 2:5 says, let this mind be in you. So you have to do the active work here of shifting and getting your mind to turn towards the mind of Messiah, which is exemplified in the 9 aspects of the fruit. Now, that's not all of the mindset. There's, read everything that you read in the New Testament. You get to learn all of the things that are about the way the Messiah saw everything and reacted to everything and thought about everything. But the fruit is at least 9 aspects of things that you should have going on when you have his mindset. Okay, well said.
All right, another one from Rumble, from C4. In judge not lest you be judged, is there more than one Hebrew or Greek word that is used there as in condemn and or judge?
I'd have to look it up. I haven't looked that up in a while, so I'd have to look that up. Hey, I like that we're getting a bunch from Rumble, so the Rumble thing is working out. I haven't looked to see how many subs we have on it. Do we have anybody that can tell us how many subs we have on, people following on Rumble? I think John's looking for it real quick.
Yeah.
How many?
399.
399. That's not bad for a couple of months of having a new group. All right, John, what else you got?
All right, from Rachel Espino. When you responded to Melissa about the kingdom, you mentioned we will have incorruptible bodies. What does that mean? We can't sin?
No. Well, the incorruptible, it's literally talking about your physical body. Okay, this body is flesh, it's corruptible, and it dies. Okay, those that are in the first resurrection and those that, when they finish the whole millennium and kingdom process, will be given an incorruptible body, one that is immortal, one that doesn't die, one that doesn't corrupt. Okay? All right, so for example, we do things for this body knowing it's corruptible to try to maintain it the best we can, knowing that that's still an effort in ultimate futility at some point because it's going to die anyway. On the other hand, when you have equipment, you try to maintain that equipment, knowing that if you don't pay attention to it, it will corrupt faster and fall apart. But if you had something that was incorruptible, it would not need any maintenance. It would not need any efforts for that because it's already going to exist and stay that way forever. All right? The words are words that Scripture uses when this corruptible will put on incorruptible. Okay? Now, does it have to do with your ability to sin? You're not getting the incorruptible body until you've overcome and will no longer choose sin. Okay? That's a whole lot, much longer discussion. We have lots of teachings to cover that. All right, next.
From m.t.o.i. Odessa, from Maria Lopez, question on verse 13. Did I understand correctly that killing my flesh or working on my stuff is sharing in Messiah's suffering?
Okay, so we're back in 1 Peter 4. But as you share Messiah's sufferings, rejoice in order that you might rejoice exultingly. I think that would be more what he's talking about a little bit in verse 1 more than verse 13. When he talks about as you share Messiah's sufferings, the attacks, remember he's talking at this point about you being attacked in verse 16 for being a Messiah follower. So he says, as you suffer for following him, if you suffer as he suffered for believing the things he believed that he got attacked for, okay? I think it's talking about more of that at that point, because that's where it's connecting in the flow as you go into, he says, if you're reproached in verse 14, the next verse, if you're reproached for the name or being a representative and doing what you do for, in Messiah's name, et cetera, then it goes down to do not let any of your suffering as for these other reasons, but if you suffer for following Messiah, now you're participating in that. So I do think that verse 1 is talking more about what you're talking about. Okay, verse 1 says, therefore, since Messiah suffered in the flesh, arm yourselves with this mind, because he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. So when you're dealing with your flesh, I think verse 1 is really dealing with you, yes, killing my own flesh, working on my own stuff is doing that, verse 1, okay? So you had the right idea, I just think you had the wrong verse.
All right, from Olivia Dirth, Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi. This week I had made a post about us officially moving to Tennessee. Being MIA the last few years because of my decrepit state, only a few people I wanted to thank for being there for me consistently, but a couple I thanked accused me of being Jewish now and in a cult. They know nothing about my walk, but blocked me, and this is my first face-to-face rejection. Would this be reproaching in verse 14?
Yes. Now this situation is what I was just talking about. So continue.
Even though the post wasn't standing on anything doctrine-wise, I thought I handled it well. I did cry, but let it go.
Right. Okay, so this is where your choice to follow Messiah in a Torah observant way, etc., is getting the reproach of the world. Okay? And that's what we're talking about here. If you are reproached for the name of Messiah, and in your understanding, the name of Messiah means the not only believing in him as Messiah, but also believing in the expectation of covenant, which requires Torah observance, the whole full package, well, that's going to get you reproached sometimes, and you're going to get blocked and mocked and attacked and everything else, and called, what are you, Jewish now, and all this other kind of nonsense, okay?
All right, from Wally World, Mary Wallen. We often don't have fervent love for one another and don't cover a multitude of sins, but expose others, quote unquote, less than issues. If you've owned your part, what does one do?
All right, so first of all, this relationship stuff, which is what the fervent love is all about, is a two-way street, right? You can't just do it one-sided. Now, you should still do your part. It just doesn't mean that it's going to work unless the other person does their part too, all right? So that's part of this. The other part of this is I got inspired as you were reading this, the word fervent. Okay, I want us to be careful with that word. What does fervent mean? I'm going to say that I think what he's trying to say here with this idea of having a fervent love for one another is that it's a strong, passionate love from the point of view of I'm going to fight for this relationship. I'm going to tolerate. I'm going to be there. In other words, it's not a small flicker of a love for somebody. Okay, I don't want to think of it as fervent, meaning that it's passionate in maybe a more sexual, relational way, meaning that you care very strongly about these people that you have this love for, and that fervency will be strong enough to overcome some of the minor challenges that you'll have in that experience, in that relationship. Does that make sense? Okay? So for example, I don't know if this is a good example, but for example, if you are a fan of a sports team, okay? If you're a lukewarm sort of casual fan, you might not really follow them very much when they lose. You might not really care. You don't have any, you might jump to another team, okay? But if you're fervent in your fan, being a fan of that team, it doesn't matter what they do. You still love that team. That's still your team. Win or lose, it's still your team. Someone says anything, you'll stand up and defend your team. Just take that to people as opposed to something really dumb like a team, okay? Like a sporting team. Some people are so fervent in their defense and love for their team. That's my team. Really? You pay anybody's checks? Okay, it's not your team. But you're a fan and you love your team. And you excuse their stupidity and bad behavior. And you're fine talking to someone else who loves your team about how bad they are, but don't let anybody that likes another team talk about how bad your team is. You see that? Do you understand what I just did? Cowboys fan. All right, good. Everybody already hates me. Now, and I don't mind talking with another Cowboys fan about everything I think is wrong with my team. But if you're a Redskins fan, I don't know, you're allowed to say that anymore? If you're a Commanders fan or Eagles fan or Giants fan, whatever, you can't come and start ripping on my team. I'll get defensive. Actually, I'm more mature than that now and I won't. But the thing is, a lot of fans will do that though. They take it all because they have a fervency. Does that make sense? So they will defend even when their team is not defendable because they're terrible, but it's my team, right? Feel that way about each other. This is my congregation member. Where's the fervency to stand up for, defend, be loyal to, care about, right? You can do that for a sports team, but you can't do that for each other. I mean, think about that fervency, okay? There's a passion. There's a level of that defends and is loyal to, etc. That's what I think he's talking about when he says, look, I need you to be fervent in your love for one another. In verse 8, right? Above all, have fervent love for one another because it covers a great multitude of sins. So are you going to stop loving your team because they suck and went 1-15 or 1 and whatever? No. Because that's your team. By the way, you're married, that's your spouse. All right, so your spouse has gone 1-15 for a little while, and it's been not the best situation, all right? But that's still yours. Certainly you should never let anybody say anything negative about yours. Where's the fervency, all right? I mean, you're still willing with your team to say, yeah, we need a new quarterback, or our defense sucks or something. So that might be the same problem with you and your spouse. But if you're fervent, you're going to cover that over and deal with what you got to do because that's still, you're fervent. That's still yours. This is my team. No, this is my wife. This is my husband. This is okay, there's some fervency there. Let's cover some of those things, right? You know why we cover that also with our teams? Because we expect it to change over time and they're going to get better at some point. So do you have that with your relationships though? Will you have a fervency of expectation that it will get better? That it's just going through a rough patch? By the way, you have like a bad team that's been bad for a while. Sometimes the rough patches go a long time. Okay, some of you young people who can remember of recent times, okay, how good the Chiefs are. Well, they weren't that good since the 70s, okay? And then all of a sudden now it was a long time where they weren't that good. Take the Patriots. They were brutal in the 70s, okay, and 80s, okay, until they finally got something turned around, okay? But you think of them now because you see them as the winners that they are. But can you see them as winners even before they get there? Or if they were winners and they have a rough patch, can you see that getting through that rough patch? Cowboys won 3 Super Bowls after going 1-15 the year before they started winning. That was pretty brutal. Although I do take great pride in the one team they beat was the team that won the Super Bowl that year, which was Washington. Okay, so, where's your fervent love? I think hopefully that metaphor works for some people to kind of get a picture. Because even if you don't ever feel that way about a sports team, you know people that do. So you know what it looks like, okay? Right? You know what it looks like. And so be a fanatic or a fan for your relationship, where you're going to excuse things, and you're going to make defense for, and you're going to believe in, and you're going to support and root for. Do you do that for your spouse? And for your marriage, for your friendships, for your congregation, for your relationship with leadership, whatever? That's my leadership. That's my congregation member. Don't you talk about them that way. See, some of you let people run their mouths, and I don't know how you let them do that. If you're fervent in your love, you shouldn't be saying, excuse me, you don't talk like that about my leadership. Oh, but you don't know what they did. No. That's my leadership. I have a fervent love. I can cover some of that. Okay, maybe some of that's true. It's okay. It's my leadership. All right? I don't expect them to be perfect. No team wins every year. All right? It's hard to win 2 years in a row. Forget about every year. I mean, it's just not easy. So yeah, you're going to have some bumps. But where's that fervent love? All right? Marlene.
I really appreciate you talking about that fervent love. And it just really opened my eyes to, I really feel like that's one thing we're learning here is how to fervently love. And watching you, Rabbi, love even the people who left, and, how you love the people that's here, that's a fervent love. You're still, they're in their mess, they're lashing out, just like last time we talked about, when a child is having a tantrum on the floor, we're not taking it personal. We realize that's them lashing out in their pain, and we have to learn this. This isn't something that is easily, it's not easy. We have to go through, we have to really guard, really press and endure to get this fervency. This isn't something that it is not going to come easily. You can't fervently do something easily. We have to go through things for that to grow.
All right, let me say two things. One, all right, this is now the reverse direction of the emotion thinking thing. You got to use logic and rational thought to realize you should be in love with each other. Knowing that you're on the same journey, going to the same place with the same expectations. So that should be birthed up here, even if you don't feel it here. Now we're taking things in the other direction, right? Usually the emotion jumps out first. All right. Sometimes an emotion is missing that needs to be there. That's where you have to say, but I should love my sister or my brother in this room because they're going through the same struggles I am. They ended up in the same place. They're trying to get to the same place I'm trying to go to. Okay? And so you generate it from here when you choose to love. Okay? I mean, there are some people you're given by default. You're born in their family or they're born in your family, right? You have people that by default you have a relationship with. Everybody else is a choice. Okay? Now, you maybe didn't choose to be in a relationship with these people, but you chose to be here. They chose to be here. That by default put you in relationship. But now you got to decide, knowing that we all end up in the same place for the same purposes and reasons, Scripture tells me I'm supposed to love you. And fervently on top of that. And I don't feel that. Then it's got to start from up here. You got to win that argument in your system. Just like you got to win the argument to shut this down when it's overly reacting and overly emotional. Well, you got to win the battle to bring the right emotion level out when it's supposed to be there and it's not there. Okay? Now, the other thing I wanted to say that you kind of triggered me to say is that, some people have legitimate bad experiences with me or with leadership in some way. Okay? Why would you let their bad experience wipe out your good experiences? I mean, do you think everybody is only going to always have a good experience with us? Do you think we're always going to treat everybody properly and right and the way they want and everything else, and they're just going to think everything's wonderful? No. So I'm not saying that people that out there are saying stuff about that's coming out of some drama. I don't necessarily agree with what they're saying, but I mean, there may be some pain or disappointment or something that they feel from us that may have a legitimate basis for something in terms of them being upset. But why would you let that wipe out all the good experiences and the other things that you know are true from your own experiences? Okay? Well, if he could do that to them, well, but I didn't do it to you. And by the way, they also had good experiences. None of these people had only bad experiences, okay? So where's the balance in all that? Where's the covering? See, if there was fervent love, then the one bad experience you had with me would be covered because the other experiences you know were there. And by the way, we have had a few people leave and come back, and all the ones that came back were always treated like they never left. They weren't treated any different. They weren't treated more special, any less special. They were treated like they never left. And isn't that the way it should be? You know, go ahead.
I was thinking about the practicing of the fervent love and conversations I've had with some people, you know, some of the people that left, and them expressing their hurt, you know. And I was thinking about what you said about Judas and how his expectation, well, I'm sorry, I don't know if you said that today.
I did.
Okay. His expectation, you know, wasn't, because my mind started thinking about different things. And I was thinking about the Matrix. Actually, when you put your hands out, the choice, you know, you could choose life or
the
death.
red pill and the blue.
Yeah. And I thought about Morpheus, and I thought about Cypher and how he wasn't satisfied with what the real world was.
No, he wanted the blue pill.
And you know, I was thinking about it was a really good movie for like the metaphor of the walk and everything. And
Wait, let's take that whole metaphor there. So Cypher, right? He had taken the red pill, was awakened up, was awakened to the real world, and it didn't meet whatever his expectations might have been. Some of you get your bubble popped, you start to experience the real world of the walk and everything else, and leadership and structure and all the kind of things. And somewhere along the line, you're like, I don't like this. This is not what I was expecting. I want to go back to the other world, but I still want to have some of this. I mean, you can't have it both ways. You know, at least to Cypher's credit, he's like, wipe my brain out, put me back in, I won't remember anything, I'll be happy with that, right? Okay, he wasn't trying to kind of bridge and have both. But that's what you guys do who leave. You kind of want to do both, okay? And you have this experience. And again, the word expectations is really the problem. Almost everybody that leaves because somehow their expectations are not met. But they're your expectations, not the ones I set for you, not the ones he set for you. They're just ones you set for you. Well, you should have called me, or you should have done this, or you didn't do that. Well, I never offered to do any of that stuff. But that's what you're supposed to do. Well, according to you, okay? And that's where we get up in all kinds of problems because people's expectations are not being met. But you know what? There's probably only 2 areas of life where expectations are agreed to. Your job, not always, but in your job, you agree to certain expectations on both sides, and you have your little employee handbook and all that kind of stuff, and your marriage. Otherwise, nobody ever talks about their expectations. They just have them. Now, most marriages that have problems because they never talked about their expectations either. And then they don't get met, and they get mad at each other, assuming the other person understands all that, which is why pre-marriage, I have people do an expectations exercise so that they can set them in advance. Because one of the things that you guys all need to understand, I've said this many times, but I'll say it again now. There are always going to be, in every relationship, expectations on both sides. However, most of the time they were never discussed or agreed to. They're just gonna be there. Which is why when I used to train leadership and train sales and all this other stuff, I used to do sales team manager and all that kind of stuff. I said, look, especially even in sales, you're dealing with a customer, make sure that you set the expectations with that customer before they come up with their own in their own head. When you have an employee and you're an employer, you set the expectations, don't let them come up with it in their own head. You're getting married, you make sure that you set the expectations with the person you're marrying instead of letting them come up with it in their own head, because they will. Expectations will be set. That's what this whole book is, to set your expectations right. This whole book has a purpose, Has lots of purposes, but one of them is to make sure you understand what you can expect from him and what he expects from you. Most of the book is showing you how people did that well and did that poorly. But the expectations are written out and described to you very clearly, okay? And so most problems in ministries with their members is because of expectation problems. It's just unfortunate because the people just figured that I should know what the expectations are that they have and meet them, and that doesn't always happen, okay? You know what the expectation was? His expectation was, I popped your bubble, I sent you to Cleveland, I sent you to that particular ministry. My expectation is that you go and get what you're supposed to get out of that. But then you insert yourself into your expectations of it. He didn't send you here to meet your expectations, he sent you here to meet his expectations. He expects that this is where you needed to be to learn and grow in a certain way and deal with some things that you don't like to deal with and don't want to deal with and are uncomfortable to deal with. And then you came here with your own expectation of what that all would look like, and that wasn't all a part of the way you saw it. And then when it came up to be that way, you forgot how you got here, okay? And I don't want to minimize that in any way. I mean, the vast majority of you, except for like 4 or 5, moved here to be here. I can't imagine that was just a whim. You know, I got nothing else to do, I'll move to Cleveland, Tennessee. Really, you didn't even know where that was till you found out about our ministry. I certainly didn't. I didn't know there was a Cleveland in Tennessee, all right? And you just thought how great it would be to live in a town of 45,000 people, all right? It's small. Well, some people might think it's big wherever you grew up in a smaller place. But I mean, you know, there's nothing about Cleveland that's all that big a deal, all right? There's nothing here. You go to Chattanooga or Atlanta, Knoxville, someplace if you want something. Cleveland doesn't have anything. But it has the most important thing, it has you guys. So in that way, it's incredible treasure. Okay, this is a great treasure box of people, right? You guys all here. But how did you get here? I mean, why are you here? Who sent you? Does that make any difference? You know. But you'll like to use the words, well, I was just sent there for a season. Okay, then what determines the season? Are you still not getting the teachings? You're not getting the insight? Am I just repeating myself every week and you're bored and I'm not saying anything that's thought-provoking and new? Not that I try to come up with new, he just gives me new all the time, okay? Because there's still an unlimited amount of things in here that have not been explained properly. No, I'm not running out of stuff to talk about. I keep thinking I will. You know, one of these days I probably cover everything, I guess. And then I end up recovering it in more depth and on the next layer, the next level, you know. All right, Marlene.
I was thinking how the Petrie dish that you talked about that we have here, we have lots of opportunities for growth in learning that fervent love, that love which is part of the mind of Yeshua, you know, that love that covers a multitude of sins. I keep thinking about him getting beat and spat on and him saying, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. That is a fervent love.
Right.
And we have to go through some things to get a love like that. That just doesn't miraculously pop in our heads, you know?
So does Father forgive him, meaning like you have a problem, let's say, with leadership, look like posting nasty posts on Facebook about it? Is that a Father forgive him? See, you guys are not understanding your role in all this. If you're supposed to be Father, forgive them. Let's assume for a second that everything you accuse me of is true. Shouldn't it still be Father, forgive them? Because everything that was happening to Yeshua was true. And he said, Father, forgive them. I mean, so does this look like Father, forgive them, the way you respond and attack and whatever else you're doing? It doesn't make any sense. That's not what it looks like scripturally, you know, to have that fervent love, okay? Look, you know what? I don't know what they do in the military anymore. I'm going to go think old school military, okay? Because I know things have sort of changed and not necessarily for the better. But old school military, part of boot camp was to see if you could make it through, because if you couldn't, then they were weeding you out, okay? They were going to beat you, push you, challenge you to see if there was quit in you. Is that right? Looking at Elder, he was in the military, right? Rabbi Tom, right? Okay? This is boot camp. Abba's going to run you through to see if you got any quit in you. So anything that really bothers you is going to show up in this congregation. I promise you. Whatever it is that's going to really irritate you, push you, challenge you to see if you got quit in you is going to show up in this building. Or you're going to experience it from one of the leadership or something. Because he's going to want to see, this is boot camp. Are you going to quit? Okay, I tell you this through a lot of the teachings. Most of the stuff that he's running you through this physical life is to make sure you have no quit in you. He cannot give you the incorruptible, immortal body if you're going to quit. So how is he going to know unless he pushes you through the ringer to test you to see and prove that it's not just so much prove it's in your heart to keep the commandments, but are you going to quit? You know, it said there was a bunch of people that stopped walking with Yeshua. They quit. People didn't want to go into the land when they spied the land. They quit. He said, fine, then you don't get to go in the land. You're going to die in the desert. I'm going to keep wandering you around until you're all dead. So I think you got to look at this not just as a Petrie dish. This is boot camp. Okay? They're going to push you to make sure if I'm going to trust you with my life on the line, so to speak, that there's no quit in you. That nothing's going to make you turn and run. That nothing's going to make you afraid. That I can trust you to always have my back and I have yours, etc. That's boot camp. And they put you through some brutal stuff back in the day. Okay, maybe some of it was unnecessary, but the whole point of it was to make sure that they had broken all that willfulness and rebelliousness and all that right spirit of disobedience and everything else that was in these fleshly people, and say, I need to rebuild you into somebody trustworthy, loyal, and reliable that isn't going to quit. Am I endorsing all what they did? No, I'm just explaining that was the purpose of that. Well, this is Abba's version of it. It's a lot nicer. It's not necessarily as fun as some things, but it's a lot nicer. I mean, nobody's really beating on you, literally, okay, and putting you through the physical challenges that could break you, whatever. But they want to make sure there's no quitting you. I mean, that's really the thing. Abba wants to put you through things and say, okay, let's see how you handle that. I know you hate this thing, so I'm going to bring this thing in the congregation and see how you handle it. You know, I'm going to have Rabbi say that thing that's going to irritate you, or he's going to do this thing that's going to get on your nerve, or whatever it is. We're going to remind you of your father, remind you of your brother, remind you of whoever, and he's going to just trigger you in this way, and are you going to run? Or are you going to have fervent love, stay and do what you need to do and get what you need to get? See, I know that a lot of people that have left understand some of that because they still watch, because they know they're still getting the words they need, but they want to get it. This is kind of like what I said, that's at least Cypher was committed, right? These people aren't committed to leave and actually leave. If you leave, then leave. If you're going to listen, then come back. See, to me, it's a cowardly thing to do. Well, I like your teaching, but I don't like the people of the congregation. I don't like you. Well, what is that? Okay? What is that? I mean, seriously, I wish we could interview everybody in Paul's congregation to see how many liked him. Some of them probably loved him. Some of you love me. Some of them really didn't like him at all, I'm sure. Same with Moses. Oh, Moses is the best. Really? A lot of people didn't listen to him, didn't like him. They bought into all the Lashon Hara that was going on, you know?
When you were in boot camp,
Wait, stay there to bring it back.
what they wanted to be sure that you knew you were no longer a civilian, that you knew you were now something different, you were a soldier. And that's why they put you through the mill. You knew of the change that was now in your life.
Right, so you became a different creature.
A different creature. And they made sure you knew it. And if you didn't know it, you were out.
Which is part of why it's hard for a lot of them to come back and become a human being civilian again, because you were turned into this other thing called a soldier, all right? And that soldier has a very specific environment where a normal human being has a different environment and a different mindset. So it's a hard adjustment. I can understand that, right? Because you've been retrained, recreated, rebuilt into something, and now you got no place to do the things you became to be. There's no place to do all of that anymore. Now what do? It's hard. Hard to stop being that. Some of you are having the same problem stopping being the regular flesh person and needing to become a set-apart, renewed person. Okay, because you should not be, that old man should be buried. Well, when you become in the military, the human being you were got buried. You became what's called a soldier. Okay? A soldier doesn't do things human beings would do. Human beings have much more caring and hearts about like death and violence and stuff than you can do as a soldier. So they have to take that out of you. And then you have to have that humanity put back into you when you come out of there. It's hard. It's very challenging, okay? Thankfully with this, you don't have that large, that big a move, okay? You're actually becoming a better person that should be more functional in every possible way, except you're trying to be more functional in a world that's already terribly dysfunctional. And that's about really hard. Marlene?
I was going to say that the callousness that you talked about, I can see that creeps in like little by little. You know, how you talked about how you get a callous is you keep doing this particular thing and then you do it over and over until you get desensitized. And then you have this calloused heart and you don't have the heart of flesh anymore. It's like a heart of stone.
Right.
And which is the opposite of the fervent love. And when you were talking about that, not that, but earlier, me and Rhonda Kay were talking about, when you were talking about the kingdom and us being together, well, the two greatest commands is loving Yahweh and loving each other.
Because we're going to be doing both of those in the kingdom.
Yes. And so this is what we have to practice. So we have to learn how to, and I was thinking about the military. They learn how to be a tight, loyal community. In the military, they treat the people that are together, they treat them as a unit. You know, I don't know anything about it personally, but in movies, when one person screws up, everybody's doing push-ups, you know? And I think that's one thing that we have lost before we came here, not necessarily before we came here. Some people are in communities, wherever they come from, but personally, I did not grow up with that sense of community. And so here is an experience that I've never had before. I mean, in some churches, I want to think it's a community, but then stuff happens and it's shown that there isn't loyalty like that. But here, I really believe that a lot of us are here, and Yahweh sent us here so that we can learn this community like he intended us, like the children of Israel in the wilderness. That even though we don't like some of the stuff that goes on, that is part of the love that covers a multitude of sin. And we have to keep like scraping the calluses off of our heart, you know, and keep choosing. We have to keep choosing life. We have to keep choosing love. We have to keep choosing the fruit of the Spirit. We have to keep choosing to let that mind be in us. You know, so I'm just so thankful to be here. And I've had some hard things that's happened here, you know, with leadership, with people. And it's opportunities for us to learn how to love because, you know, we're supposed to love our enemies. We're supposed to love those that despise us or do things to us. That's part of I feel like part of the getting the calluses off of ourselves. Like we have to keep on enduring, to keep choosing. We have to keep choosing every time something comes up because we have to practice, right? We have to practice to get it right. So that's the part of transforming. And I thank you for this teaching. And like Rabbi Tom said, I have to listen to it over and over again because my mind went off when you were talking about Juicy, I was thinking about this song, and I'm not even going to say it, but I was going through it in my head, and I was like, ooh, I missed a whole bunch.
And live streamers, that was Marlene's conspiracy to block you guys from being able to say anything anymore, so she used up all your time. And did you have anything that seemed pressing, John? I mean, I'm sure there's still a bunch more.
Maybe this one from Ernesto, the last one he asked, it kind of seems relevant. If we move to Cleveland, Tennessee, it should be without our current baggage because we would just be the same mess of a person here, but there, correct?
Correct, absolutely. But on the other side of it, when you move here, you are going to come with some of your baggage, and so everybody needs to know that everybody came here with some of their baggage. Okay? See, you'd like this whole place to be all kind of like you would like it to be. But you know what? There are people in here that are very helpful to other people in here because they have some baggage and they've had some experiences, which means that we're going to have the full spectrum of people with every possible background and experience eventually here, so that the other people that come that have similar to that also will be able to relate to them, right? They'll have some people that can say, I know what you're going through. I've been there. I've done that. I can relate to that, okay? But yes, if you do come, you're going to come with some baggage, but realize that you are bringing baggage, okay? Which means that some of the problems you have here will be the same problems you had at every other congregation that you had problems in, because you brought you to all of them, okay? And so that is not necessarily the problem everywhere you've been, but it could be a part of it, a contributory part of it, wherever you've been, okay? Because the common factor all through the whole thing is you, all right? But look, just so that, I like what she said, even the idea of loving an enemy. If you think I'm your enemy, what's it supposed to look like to love your enemy? Is all these posts and attacks really loving your enemy? And if you think I think you're trying to do one of two things. You're either trying to just shame and embarrass or whatever and attack because you're in pain, or you think you're trying to save people from something you think is so terrible. But then if you're trying to do the second one, then you basically just said that every person in here that's had a positive experience, life-changing positive experiences, that's not real, that they really didn't have that, because you're basically saying that this shouldn't exist, they should be rescued out of here, and you're mocking their all the people that stand up here and give their positive testimonies of the life-changing experiences. And so that's sad. But then you guys, you don't stand up against all that, because those attacks are attacking you, not just me, not just Elder, not just Rabbi Tom, not just the leadership here, because they're mocking your experience. They're saying that this place is not real, that I'm a big narcissistic, phony wolf in sheep's clothing, whatever. That's what all these posts are saying. Fine. Well, if you have a different understanding of all that, maybe you might want to, if you're still friends with some of these people, just come and say, I don't understand why you're attacking like this. I'm sure you're in pain and everything else, but I did not have that experience that you had. Which means that it's possible to have the experience I've had, not just the one you had. You might want to give that a shot. Okay? But don't attack them. Reach out and say, out of compassion, saying, obviously you're in pain, but my experience is not your experience. I think that you can get what you need and expect and desire out of this if you would just approach it right. I don't want you to slam back their slamming. Okay? There's no need to do that. Just recognize they're lashing out, which means that they need a hug or something, okay? That's what you see, a child just lashing out, and you go, come over here, let me hug you and make you feel better and calm down and stop screaming, right? Okay? They feel unloved, unappreciated, unsomething, okay? So whatever it is that they're feeling, see if you can do something then to help that out and invite them back or whatever it is, But you might want to just help them understand that your experience is different. And they're going to try to argue with you for their experience, and then you can say, no, your experience is still your experience. Maybe yes, no, whatever, but mine is not that. I have a different relationship, apparently, with the leadership here than you did, or with other people here than you did. But I want to tell you, my experience is just as real as yours. And so when you're attacking, realize you're attacking that a lot of people have had my experience and like being here and appreciate what they've gotten in the life-changing that they've done and the growth that they've gone through, okay? So maybe you make that case. And maybe the case, at least for the idea of at least de-escalate, right? Why don't we just de-escalate all this nonsense, okay? And again, I'm not saying this for me. It hurts you guys, all right? I don't even see the posts because I don't even have Facebook. So I don't really care.